You're listening to Cultivation Elevated, hosted by Michael Williamson, where we discuss vertical farming and the future of cannabis and food production. You'll be learning key insights for vertical farming success from leading industry operators, growers, and executives. If you're a grower or owner looking to optimize your existing or new indoor cultivation facility, or anyone looking to cultivate more in less space, we've got you covered. Cultivation Elevated, sponsored by Pipp Horticulture.
Welcome to another episode of Cultivation Elevated, sponsored by Pipp Horticulture. My name is Michael Williamson, and I am down at Indico in Sugar City, Colorado, with Josh and Owen. Thank you guys for taking the time to, make time for us today. I really appreciate the tour. For people who are listening at home, can you guys kind of each take a moment to kind of give some background information on you and kind of your role here at Indico?
Sure. You want to go first? Well, my name is Owen Miller. I'm a DJ. I'm also the director of cultivation and any hat that I have to wear in order to make it happen.
Nice.
Josh Foley. I'm one of the owner-operators as well. Like Owen, I do many things around the garden as well as our sales, outside sales, building relationships with the company, with the market. So we started Indico in 2017. We found this property out here in Sugar City, which is out in the middle of nowhere, but we were able to acquire land for cheap, and it was one of the few places that we could actually build from the ground up. That was important to us because we didn't want to basically inherit somebody else's problems by taking over an existing license and grow. So the building was designed using nothing but metal and plastic, antimicrobial panels, our insulation value, all the studs are metal, no biomaterial that could potentially, breed microbial growth or whatever. And so that was our starting place. And one of the most important things, whenever we first designed it, we were going to use double-ended high-pressure sodium lights. But that was right at the cusp of when we started hearing whispers about LEDs were, doing new things. We had both tried LEDs, long ago, little purpley UFO lights, and grew some fantastic art.
With some cooling fans on top too. Yeah.
Exactly. We went and did some research. Fluence was the company that we focused on mainly because at that point in time I was living in Texas. I was about an hour and a half away from Austin, which is where Fluence is based out of.
Sure.
So we started by going and touring their facility. Where they have the diode printing machines.
It's quite impressive. I remember the first time I toured, I was like, oh, you do all of this in-house like this? I was like...
expected to show up and be
like a chop shop? Yeah.
No, there's like $500,000 diodes and everything.
Yeah.
And so from there, we wanted to see what some of the product looked like. So Owen lived in Pueblo at the time. We came up, we went and looked at a facility off Ironton, Denver, that was using some of the Fluence lights, and the bud looked good. Nice dense stubs, the formation of the bud, the structure, everything looked nice. And so we basically had to pivot and make the decision to go with Fluence or LED without really getting to do much R&D with it. And of course, the main attraction to using the LED at that point in time was because of the Pipp racking and being able to maximize and be more efficient in the space. We're only a 10,000 square foot building with about 4,500 square feet of canopy with 2 tiers. And so, the allure of being able to double your footprint in the same space was really what made us pivot without getting to do a lot of research and R&D on it. But it worked out amazingly so.
But as growers, you saw something you're like, that's good enough over at that place you toured. You're like, if they can make it look like this, then we can do it. We can do better than this.
Exactly. The place wasn't super clean.
Yeah.
A lot of the materials and stuff that they were using was kind of older.
Sure.
Older technology. And so just being able to, be at this pivotal moment in the industry where LEDs are becoming more relevant. The Pipp racking is starting to make waves. And so we're both super OCD clean freaks.
Yeah, it shows through your facility. It's nice.
And so like just all white everything is our vision, right? Like white floors, white walls, white racks, all white everything. And so it all just kind of came together, and man, I mean, just right off the jump, you know, started harvesting some of our first harvests. It was we were super impressed. So like at that first harvest, even we were blown away by the results that we got. And then as far as the racking goes, that was when and we still have them, but the tables were the multi-section 1-foot sections, but even that wasn't hard to pull out, clean, put back in and start over. So that's kind of the progression of how we got to be here with the
leap of faith.
Yeah, exactly. And couldn't be more excited about it at this point, really. I mean, I definitely see it as being kind of the future of indoor cultivation anyways. There's a lot to learn about it.
Sure.
As far as keeping your rooms from forming microclimates and stuff like that, but it's manageable if you have a background and you understand how airflow and these types of things happen, then it's not that hard.
It seems like a lot of people who will give vertical farming a try for the first time who are like pretty reluctant anyways, maybe they get forced to do it by like an investor or something like that, and they almost like will find ways to make it fail. But the area that I see people struggle the most is really, it's not like so much that it's not the rack's fault or the light's fault, but it's really poor engineering associated with HVAC and air exchanges per hour, and then also in rack and circulatory. How do you treat air in the cube and around the cube? If you're in tune with the plant and your space and you were willing to take the time to kind of dial in a few things, like it's nice when you have success on your first crop. A lot of people don't have that. I'm sure if you didn't have the background that you had, that'd probably be a little bit of a different story.
Well, and speaking of that, Owen, you want to kind of start with where how'd you guys get connected? How'd you guys meet?
I'd like to say that Indico began back in 1996 when Josh and I met back in high school. We just met just like any other guys would meet through a mutual friend, and Josh came over to my mom's house one weekend while she was out of town. I had a few friends over and we rolled up some blunts, and we just got super stoned, and I just like to think that that's when Indico started. We just didn't know it yet.
Sure.
And Josh and I used to, roll around and drive around town and smoke blunts and listen to Outkast, and we just have just a great time. And so we went to high school together, and then years later we met back up, and we both were growing cannabis indoors, and so we clicked and we started talking about it and helping each other out, giving tips. He taught me a lot. I think I probably showed him a few things. We did some indoor grows together, and then he had a medical grow out in California, and I used to go out there and help him out, trim and cultivate, and he showed me a lot, and that's kind of how we met, and that's sort of how Indico got started.
Nice.
Yep, no doubt. We were in Texas on the unregulated market.
Sure.
For a long time, and then I was actually about to have my first child, and so I, wanted to go legit.
Yep.
And so went out to South Lake Tahoe, started a medical grow. Went to the doctor. I had all of my patients. I was their caregiver. Sure. I held their cards, and so we did that for 4 years, I guess, almost 5 years. The price at that time, and now it's just funny because it was so low back then, $3,000 a pound.
Yeah.
It's like, man, at $3,000 a pound, that's just nothing. We're doing $6,000 a pound back in Texas.
And back then, you could just show your chronic, take it straight to the dispensary. They just count out your money in a money counter, and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yeah. All you had to do is just go get a recommendation from the local physician and get your plant count in order, and you were licensed.
Yeah, California's kind of beautiful and awesome in that historic way. I mean, if you wanted to be a part of that plant, like, it was a pretty easy path to do things.
It was. Yeah. You could throw duffel bags in the trunk and then just head down.
Bomb to the dispensaries, yeah.
You have to step through the dispensary, and then when weed mats stuff came out, and you could just get on weed mats and just go to every spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made the mistake of being greedy, and I started shipping product back to Texas to get twice the price or whatever. I got in trouble. It wasn't long after that Owen actually ended up going ahead and moving out here to Colorado. So I was on probation for many years, it feels like.
Which we were saying earlier is like now it's like a benefit for social equity and all this stuff, all these different injustices. If you're in a new license state, they're giving priority to people who've had previous charges and things like that.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I got raided, door kicked in.
Yeah, it's scary.
Pregnant wife, gun drawn on her. I mean, it's, not my proudest moment by any means, but it's all part of the journey, And so I went to go work at a car dealership, worked my way up. I was GM at a Ford dealership for 7 years while I was on probation. At that point in time, I met an individual that is big ag in Texas. And that was right when they were passing the Compassionate Use Act in Texas. So he had heard through the grapevine about me and the things that I had done, and was known for growing,
having a green thumb. Yeah.
And so I came to him, and I'm thinking to myself, they're only going to be giving 3 licenses in Texas. If anybody's going to get a license, surely one of the guys that's like the head of an agricultural deal in South Texas is as good a candidate as any. So I went to him. We started talking about it. So then we started the discovery process of trying to find out what it would look like to get a license. One of the things we did was we came up here to Denver to visit Medicine Man.
Yeah, sure.
They
did tours and stuff. Yeah.
Tours, design, consulting, all that. He had never seen a cannabis plant growing before. So we did the tour, did all that. So while we were here, I told him, I said, my buddy Owen lives down Pueblo. If you want to see what really good
this looks
good
like, fireweed looks like,
drive down, and I'll see if they'll let us come by and take a look, because he had his medical card.
Yeah.
And was growing his medical plant. So we went down, and of course, as you know, like people, when they really see that first plant that's just, perfect form,
glistening,
it's all inspiring. And people, I mean, it gets them booked like that.
Yeah.
And so like right after that, we went west out to Idaho Springs to Tommy Knocker's brewery. We were sitting there spitballing, and I was like, man, it's obviously not going to be profitable in Texas because of the way the law is written, the number of patients that would be available.
Yeah, not for a while.
Like, you're going to hemorrhage millions of dollars for years until they come up with some type of viable program. So I was like, well, let's start in Colorado. It's a mature market. The regs that are in place make sense. They actually have it pretty dialed.
Yeah, clear path to licensure.
So let's get our design down. Let's build a building. Let's get our SOPs in place. Let's, because, I had 5 trap houses going at once, but that was as big as.
Sure.
That's not the same.
That's like a logistics nightmare too.
Having
like
a bunch of small grows is not the same as having one big grow.
No. I would even argue that one big grow is actually easier.
Absolutely.
That's what we did at Kind Love. Like when vertical integration came into play, we had a small 5,000 square foot and like another 7,500, and then vertical integration came, so we quickly got 3 other people, and they were in the 5,000 to 15,000 square feet. But between Denver and Boulder and having to manage 5 different grower personalities and 5 electric bills and 5 security bills, I went to my partners, like, man, we are doing it wrong. We need to put everybody under one big roof. And that's when we kind of went big in 2013 and consolidated under one roof and just streamlined efficiencies. One of the things that I see on the tour that I was on today is like, you clearly have spent time or gotten insights and knowledge from some form of like lean manufacturing or lean design flow, or like you can tell that there's a lot of good logic to like what I call the path of the plant. A lot of people will like be stepping over each other throughout these different stages. You guys do a lot of things, and that's part of that kind of keep it simple, stupid philosophy.
Well, and so funny enough, I mean, most of the houses that I grew in were like 4-bedroom houses. And so there was this flow of 3 bedrooms that were made into flowering rooms, and then one of the rooms was
for nursery veg,
nursery stuff. And so like that little round robin,
1-to-3 ratio is nice from a design standpoint, I think.
It really works. And most of the strain, even though LEDs do finish up plants a little bit faster than HPS, they do. They finish anywhere from a week to 3 or 4 days faster on average.
Sure.
I think. But 9 weeks, right? Most strains that are out there, 9 weeks is going to be, even if they're around 8-week finishers, usually they can go 9 weeks and finish up a little bit better. Or even if it's a little bit longer than a 9-week plant, at 9 weeks,
It's acceptable.
It's viable to pull down and use. So that 9-week rotation is what seems to be like that in that middle.
That's, I would say, what I majority see out there in the field and stuff. Like, it's very rare to see someone doing 10 weeks. It's hard to make financial sense. It throws a wrench in the production schedule, and now it becomes a special thing.
Exactly. And unfortunately, a lot of the retail spaces, they still have everything labeled by indica, hybrid, sativa.
Sure.
And your classic sativa strains are going to be your longer finishers. And so, I mean, are there any true sativas out there on the shelf? Probably not, because of the amount of time that it takes. I mean, it's like
So sativa leaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sativa leaning hybrids.
Yeah. Polyhybrid.
You a little energetic.
Yeah.
In reality, people were.
Yeah, and I think you see it more in terpenes too. Like, a lot of the fruits kind of tend to lean in that direction, and some of that stuff for people. And we're now seeing that transition in language and kind of common nomenclature of like indica and sativa is not exactly the most accurate way to portray this information, but.
So I have a question for you. Since
Oh, okay. Yeah.
all over. One of the trends that I've seen here is that, like, in the wintertime, the consumer is looking for more of like the gassy type strains seem to be more popular as a whole. And then as you get into spring and summer, fruits start to be more popular and the consumer's looking for more. Do you think that's a Colorado thing, or are you seeing something like that more across the board?
It's probably a Colorado thing, just for the simple reason, and I'll use the Bay Area because we all kind of know it. Like, the Bay Area, when I got out there in 2015 and 16 with Harborside, and I was learning about buying trends between the San Jose store and the Oakland store, it's like Oakland wanted a bunch of purple, like sleepy, like, typical what people would describe as an indica dominant experience. And then San Francisco wanted like really anything like cookies, hypey, I guess Runts cookies, that kind of gelato kind of family. Oakland liked gelato too because it was purple. And then you got into like San Jose, and you have Silicon Valley and all that stuff where you have like more tech focused consumers, and they were like really into like racy sativas and fruit flavor stuff. And so it was interesting to see, like, just within I don't even know how many miles that is, but it's not that far, right? You can drive it in an afternoon and loop the whole thing, how the buying differences were so different in demand by micro region, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's trends to things too, like more mature states, you'll see more diversity of genetics, but you also see older stuff that like that's been around for 10 years or 9 years, where you won't see that as much in a newer market. But yeah, it's so interesting, the buying trends, and I'm not the expert on that by any means, but yeah, there's definitely seasonality to things too, where it's like, oh, that's just more appealing in the summer. Yeah. I want that watermelon, kiwi, rosin, or something, because it's got that summer vibe, and maybe there's some more gas or whatever it is in the winter.
And as people become more connoisseurs and more knowledgeable.
Yeah. And figure out what's there.
Crusade that we're on right now anyways is the against THC. To educate, bud tenders on how to educate people.
On that note, can we talk about audio terps?
Yeah.
So there's a big correlation with your relationship and how you guys met through music and through cannabis, which it's amazing how many people, it's like cannabis, music. There might be like also, I've learned like some of the best cannabis growers are also like really good dog breeders, or they make like really good sourdough bread or something. And there's always these like interesting little artisan paths that come out as people's hobbies and things once they kind of commit to a culture.
There's not too many better combos than those two things. And, what's better than just getting super blazed on your favorite strain and listening to your favorite music? I mean,
yeah, it's pretty perfect.
It goes hand in hand. So for us, it's a kind of a no-brainer. We met through music and cannabis, and that's what we continue to do. I'm a DJ, and so we had an idea when we first started that we would do video DJ sets in the grow. We just thought it would be a cool idea. After our first harvest, we did that. We had a little DJ set in the grow. I went in there and I scratched for the plants and made a mix, and we threw it up on Instagram and Facebook, and we just had a huge positive response on it. And we had over 100,000 views on that one little video snippet. And ever since then, we've been getting guest DJs to roll through, play music for the plants. I play music for the plants often. Every single day, there's a boombox playing in one of the rooms.
Yeah. The energy felt good when I came in here today.
So we just like to think that when you play music for the plants, it instills the audio terps.
Yeah, so like you said, the energy and the vibe, right? So obviously there's scientific data that people have tried to collect on musical vibrations and the effects on plant growth. And there's obviously something there.
We believe it.
Yeah, we totally believe in it. And then there's a deal called the Ganja Grid that somebody just made. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like a metal trellising system that hooks up to a
some kind of frequency
frequency device, and it creates pulses, and it literally like
interesting
vibrates and it's on
pretty music.
It'll play to the music
through vibration.
That's wild.
But the one thing that is blatantly apparent is that the plants are living things, and the mood and the environment around the plants affects the plant growth itself. And so by playing music, we're trying to create this positive energy and this positive vibe in the garden that then translates to the plants being happier, growing, and then obviously, happy plants is a better smoke. So that's where audio terps come.
I love it. Like music plays such a big correlation into like productivity of labor and like how you feel.
Yeah.
I remember early days at Kind Love when we were trying to like dial in the dispensary experience, and that's what you're giving. You're giving your plants an experience, you're giving your team an experience, and you're carrying that story through all the way through your packaging and your end result to the end consumer, which is cool. And it's showing them
really
that.
Fun just to play music in a room full of plants.
Yeah.
It's super fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We
So there's been some people like the movement is a band. I don't know if you're familiar with the movement, but like they were at Red Rocks and Gary Dredd, their drummer, came through. He also
nice
DJs and does some stuff. So he did a set in the garden, and like it's a morale booster, for the plants and the people, like you said.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's been a lot of fun.
We learned in a retail environment that we had like an older clientele in the morning, so we'd like just keep it classic with some like old school Frank or like just something that they grew up on that they haven't heard, and to keep it we played with lighting as well, like lighting and sound together from an experiential standpoint. But then at night like we had younger people getting out of restaurants and stuff, so I mean like we would just bump it in there. And at the time like this was like back when like Pretty Lights was really hitting the Colorado scene super hard and playing Red Rocks a lot, so I mean like we'd get down in there, and but everybody would walk in and they were like, the energy in this place is so good. And I think energy is people, but it's also like these other stimuli that you bring in. It's so interesting. I wasn't really a big believer in, I guess, as big of a believer as I am today in energy at different levels. And I remember my business partner, the Gem Show was in town, and we were about to open up the retail for the first time. He's like, I'm taking $2,000, I'm going to the Gem store or the Gem Show. And I'm like, is that what we should be doing? And like comes home with these big like amethyst caves. And sure enough, like people would come in and like, they're just like, beeline it for the amethyst caves, or they'd like pull crystals out of their pockets and charge them up in there while they were buying some weed. And I was like, man, there's like something to this, there's something that I clearly don't completely understand.
Right. Well, it's like Laser Cat.
Yeah.
Hash producer here. They like wash with crystals in the wash.
Nice.
To do energy transfer. Like it's
Know that, bro. I like that.
Sure. Yeah, they do put out a tasty product. So
Shout out to Laser.
yeah, exactly. Tell me more about, I kind of got the like 20-year growers, took a leap of faith, saw some new technology, went and toured somewhere and said, okay, if these guys can get it to this level, we can definitely, this is viable and we can take it to the next level. So from there, you guys got busy on build out and construction, and you had a successful crop for your first crop, which not everybody does. But I guess, is there anything from, if you're a new user or you're someone a listener of ours that's maybe like, hey, I've been a classic traditional grower for a long time, like I'm just on the fence here. Is there like any messaging that you would tell them from a pros or cons standpoint of like, here were the pros, but here's things that we had to learn to change or pivot to make sure it was successful?
The height as far as the racking and stuff goes?
Yeah, or just multi-tier.
Yeah, so the multi-tier, the height restriction was a little bit granted. Our building was supposed to have 15-foot ceilings whenever we built it. We did pour the footers high enough.
Okay.
So we lost like 1.5 feet of ceiling space. So instead of having 12-foot, racking, which I think is your standard.
Yeah, I mean, they do all kinds of sizes, but a lot of people are in that 12, 14 sometimes. Okay.
So that's racking. So we have 54 inches of space from tray to light. And so, luckily it just kind of fell into place. We came up with the name Indico. And at the point in time, I don't think we realized that we were going to be specializing primarily in like
non-stretchy, bushy. Yeah.
So, man, I'm glad that worked. But so that was the one thing, is just the plant maintenance, being able to anticipate, and learning your strains and knowing that this strain during, from week 2.5, 3 to 5 is really going to stretch a lot. And so we know that you have to get ahead of it and do some super cropping and maybe bending over, using the trellis to do so and hold it down in some instances. So that was like probably one of the bigger learning curves with the racks.
Yeah, to make sure like plants aren't growing like through the lights or something.
Yeah. Yep. And then, really thinking through the airflow scenario in the room, as far as, not just on the top tier having fans, but on that bottom tier having plenty of airflow across the canopy. And then what we did was we used some of the, just because the racks don't move from wall to wall, and so you can't really put oscillating fans or fans mounted on the wall pointing towards the garden, because
not your typical like 18-inch oscillating fan, right?
So we used 10-inch max fans positioned in the corners where the tables don't roll, and then we basically created this like exterior vortex around the room, where on each wall you have fans that are pointed down the wall, and then the wall at the back going, and it just kind of,
I call it the NASCAR track, it's like it's the infinity loop, right? And just trying to circulate. And corners of rooms are always really interesting, because it's like seemingly where that microclimate loves to have its first, like, I'm going to pop up something nasty for you to deal with,
Exactly. And then I think the number one learning curve going to a commercial scale, and then just, we've got so many plants packed into a small space, it's making sure that you don't underestimate the amount of dehumidification that you need in the room.
Yeah.
However much water you are putting into a room on a daily basis, you need the ability to at least take that out with dehumidification, maybe even more so, just because of it's one thing to take it out over a 24-hour period, but I mean, you need to be able to change your humidity levels in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, especially when lights go off, right?
So you need to really focus on having the proper dehumidification amounts, because if not, in a multi-tier system, those microclimates form really, really fast.
And then also, during certain stages of growth, you also want to make sure that you have humidification, depending on where you're located. Since we're in the high desert of southern Colorado, during certain times we have to add humidification.
For sure.
It can be a bit of a challenge. And also, it's probably the number one thing that we've noticed that growers overlook when we go and tour facilities is a lot of times their rooms are just way too dry to start out, and the plants are not flourishing from the get-go.
Yeah, it's that transition time, right? When you go from like veg to flower and you have a bigger space and there's not a lot of biomass developed yet, and there's that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's how you're starting, and I call it like the path of vigor, but like staying in that vigor curve of growth is key, because as soon as you do that, it's like you have that setback, you're like, oh, I just lost a week.
So in our bedrooms, starting out, it's 60 to 65% humidity no matter what, day one, all the way through. Because if you don't start off with that high humidity, your plants are gonna suffer right off the bat.
Yeah. And you also want to, precondition your room, so that when you're moving your plants from veg into your flowering room, you want to make sure that you have your humidity levels and your vapor pressure deficit in the right realm before you move them in, and don't move move them in and be reactive to trying to get them there, because that'll also stunt that plant growth right off the jump, which you don't want to do. So.
We talked about it earlier a little bit, but it's interesting how many people, particularly around transitional times from like one plant stage to another, they'll just compound stress on the plant. You know, they're like, heavy skirt, slam more light on it, I'm going to change the nutrients, I'm going to physically handle it and move it, my environment's going to be different. Yeah, and it's like, whoa, like easy, you know, like, I mean, those, not that all of those things don't have their place, but like staggering some of that stuff, you know, a lot of people, you know, are like complain about defoliation, I notice in startups, and they're like, it's just so much work. And one of the things that we've been telling people is like, hey, like, what if you just defoliated like a little bit every week, you know, because they get on to like 10 to 14 days or day 21, day 45, and then a little bit more towards harvest. And everybody does it differently. But for these larger grows who can't get in there and defoliate in like that shorter time frame, we find that if you figure out a thing like 3 minutes per tray and you're just going after strategic fan leaves that are obviously blocking light from above and kind of work your way down, that we can break up a lot of that, like the burden of a heavy defol.
And also timing too, if you hit it at the right time, you know, it could take a lot of time and effort out of your defoliation and lollipop.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's certain products too that we noticed that when you use at the right time, it actually cuts back on the amount of biomass that's produced after you defoliate at the right time. Like the mammoth, where we were doing a lot of our R&D with the mammoth.
Mm-hmm.
After our day 21 defol, from before and after using that product, the amount of leaf that grew back was considerably less. And then even when we got to the very end of the rounds, we would weigh, when we wet weighed the plants, the plants actually weighed a little bit less.
But there was more flower.
More product.
That's what you want.
And our amount of trim that we had went down considerably. And so like that, you know, you got to take that into consideration as well.
You guys have a lot of good genetics. Can we touch base on some of like what's kind of in the collection and how some of maybe the inspiration behind maybe some of the breeders or some of the cuts or whatever it might be that, you know, really shine bright for your op and wash well?
We can talk about is the Mandarin Sunset, which is one of the first strains we started out with in the facility, which we purchased from Colorado, because that's the only person that we could get clones from when we started out. Colorado, they had the clones in metric and everything.
Yep.
So one of the strains we got from them was the Mandarin Sunset, and that did really, really well for us starting out.
Yeah, it's an ethos.
It's a genetics.
Yeah, Colin over at Ethos.
Love that one. We won first place Best Indica in the 2018 Cannabis Cup.
2019.
And you open your doors in 2017?
We got our first plant in the building in December of 2018. And then the first cup that we entered was 2019. And so, yeah, first place, that was the only entry that we
Nice.
that year.
That was a one, huh?
Yeah. And that was a lot of fun because that was before COVID. So there was actually an event.
Sure.
It was like 3,000 people, you know, and that was a lot of fun. And then we entered it again in 2020 and won first place with it again. And then the sour strawberry that we had won first place hybrid that year as well. So, but as far as genetics go, like I said, we are limited in space.
Sure. But you keep a good amount of genetics. You mentioned, what, about 25?
Yeah.
And in like some form of rotation? Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes we end up having a mom that just sits in the corner and, you know, once it gets too big and it's not fleshy, it hardens off, you know, we'll have to cycle it back out, but we'll pull it out. From what I've seen, it seems like the consumer, you've only got about, I mean, depending on how often you're putting it out, if you're putting it out every round, you've got like 6 to 8 months before strain is no longer appealing.
Sure.
To the consumers, right? The shelf life for strains and is super short. But some of the other breeders, exotic genetics, of course, Loving in Her Eyes, which is a local Colorado breeder that she does some amazing stuff, and I think she does do quite a bit of work with those as well.
Okay.
And she's been, she's fantastic. She's been growing for 20-something years as well, and like that's her crossing and doing the genetics is her passion. And so like she's just got basically nothing but new genetics that she's constantly running across.
Nice.
So she's a wealth of the archive.
Yeah, Fletcher and that whole crew. They've done great work forever.
I mean, basically everything that we've popped from archive has been fire. The Lost Cause, which is the Amnesia Haze and the Do, is one that we popped, towards the beginning of our go, and it's still around just because it dumps for hash. The medicinal properties are on the chart.
Sure.
We pulled it back, and then there's basically an outcry from people that were like, where did this go? I need this. So we more or less, even if it's only a couple tables, more or less keep it running all the time. And then you smell that it's got like a kind of a sugar cookie type of real subtle.
Yeah, it was like a fresh bakery to me. Yeah, you could get that.
That particular
sweet
terpene profile actually matches like with a lot of different flavors. So the fact that it, dumps 6% on washing, we can do that. And then some of our other strains like Military Chocolate that have a really good terpene profile, but doesn't wash so well, we can pair them together. And then all of a sudden that 6% with that 2.5% makes sense.
And for anyone that's new to the podcast or new to some of this language, when we talk about washing, we're generally talking about solventless hash production, which you guys do here as well. And washing is generally in terms of the yield of the extraction itself, and generally just very primitive approach to cannabis. But it is, in my opinion, the best qualitative product and experience of the plant, because you catch terpenes, you catch head high, you catch body high. I mean, it's really like a full experience versus a lot of the traditional hydrocarbon stuff from a personal standpoint.
Exactly. And it's something that's been around for just so long.
Millennia.
We've been washing our trim in bubble bags,
Sure.
for 18 years or better. And it's one of those things that I've noticed is that typically with like hydrocarbon extractions, headaches.
Sure.
When I eat gummies that are from hydrocarbon, I tend to get headaches a lot of time, and I don't know if it's because maybe it's not strain specific and it's like a melting pot of material, or the hydrocarbon itself, but solventless is,
And
in my opinion, just the most basic and cleanest.
Pure.
Yeah.
So you guys were one of the kind of first groups that I saw that did some collaborations in the solventless gummy production with a company called Dialed In. Can you guys tell me a little bit more about kind of that relationship and that product and how it's different than maybe a traditional gummy that someone has experienced?
So Jason is the owner of Dialed In. He was a solventless hash producer for a while. And he broke off and decided that, he had the idea of doing strain specific, full spectrum rosin gummies. And it's, it's simple. It's not super complicated, but absolutely brilliant. I think that Colorado being a little bit more of an educated market was something that they were primed for. People were looking for that. One of the main differences, I believe, with their gummies as opposed to traditional gummies is that he actually uses the gelatin. So like when you purchase gummies, it tastes just like Harborough gummy bears. It's not. I think that a lot of gummies hit the market that are sugar coated,
like pectin based or something.
Fruit juice, with sugar on them. And so like the fact that these gummies were delicious and that they were strain specific.
Well, you can taste terpenes, right? Like cannabis and edibles has always been kind of like the cannabis taste has been like a frowned upon thing because it's decarbed and it just has lost a lot of that.
So they work on, they're very big on getting the terpene profile from whatever cannabis is going to go into the gummy, and then they try to pair their flavors of their gummies to
with fruit juice and stuff.
Profiles that are going in, and so and they truly cared. Before they would buying product to go in their stuff. He goes out and he tours the groves, and he wanted to see the process of how we did, and so he takes a lot of pride in what he does. And like even just recently when they bought some of the rosin that we made to use instead of, because I guess when they started they would buy trim, and then they would do it all in house. Do the wash, press, do all that. And so they're still doing that, but now the demand is so big that they're actually buying just bulk rosin from. But one of the things was that he was very specific about that the rosin had to be full spectrum. Like it can't just be 45 and 160 U food grade.
Sure.
Like
it's not separated.
And then the other part that he really liked when we first started is our curing process, even our trim, because of the way that we dried our plants, is basically cured. And so that helps to retain some of those terpene profiles.
Can you highlight some of the stuff that you guys do in drying and kind of some of the specs that you like to,
I guess,
prefer?
Start with the flush,
Yeah. So it all starts with the good flush. 2 weeks of plain water. The first few days we use
cleanse,
which sort of psychs down the salts. Break it all down before you flush, and then you flush for a full 2 weeks. And then it sits in our dry room, which is humidity and temperature controlled at 60% humidity and 60 degrees for about a week and a half to 2 weeks. And
Nice.
it stays that temperature and that humidity at 24/7 in that room, which makes it really nice for our curing process. And then it's hand trimmed and glass cured.
And you hang whole plant too?
Yeah, we hang the whole plant, which obviously the significance to that would be, or maybe not obviously, but the significance to that is that whenever your product is starting to dry, the buds start to dry, the water, the plant's reaction, even when it's been cut down, is to try to preserve itself. So it starts to draw all of the moisture from the buds back into the stems. So by hanging up the whole plant and not just having your buds on a short stem, you're basically giving the plant the ability to pull all of the moisture out of the buds back into the main stock. And that's where, that water is where a lot of the starches and sugars that are in the flower is still, what didn't get flushed out is still in there. So as it dries, those starches and sugars get pulled back into the stalk of the plant and pulled out of the bud, which, that's the stuff that gives you like a first taste. So then we take it down, we hand trim it, it goes in a glass jar.
Yeah, you got some massive glass jars.
Yeah, so those were actually fermenting jars that we found for fermenting beer, cider, or whatever, but they're 7 gallons, so we can put about 3 pounds in a jar and still have enough airspace to be able to cure in there. And so they'll stay in the glass jar for at least 3 weeks, if not longer, before it'll be able to go out to the shelf. But the point of the glass jar is whenever it's sealed, terpenes are highly volatile as far as their the boiling point or whatever. So like whenever they hit air outside, they basically evaporate. So by sealing them in glass jars, as it's evaporating from the product, it's basically just hanging out, being reabsorbed by the plant.
Terp marination.
Yep, that's it. And
We
so
feel that it preserves the terps better than plastic does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cure inside little plastic buckets.
Even metal to that point, because even like stainless steel is more rough on the surface. It has more porous, I guess, than glass would be. Obviously, plastic it'll leach the smell from the plant. So it was crazy because that's the way we always cured it, was ball glass jars and put everything in there. You put it in a dark place for a while, pull it back out, and it's ready. And so when we came to Colorado, that was the first thing. It's like, oh, shit, man, we're gonna have 4,000 ball jars in this room, And so we found those, and it was crazy because as we were bringing purchasing managers from dispensaries through to do their tours, to see the product before they would buy, they were all just blown away by the fact that we were curing in these glass
Sure.
jars.
Yeah, it's not common.
I didn't know that was
Wasted it, you know, and we started with pickle jars, and it's just a natural progression.
Yeah. What I guess where can someone who's listening find your products? Like, do you have some flagship stores, or are you kind of all over the state at this point? It seems like you guys are really a true craft grower who's designed to be hand batched, hand packed, hand loved, and isn't sitting on a shelf for very long. So it seems like you guys are really designed to be, you know, making drops and selling out.
Yeah, and we like our prepackaged dates. You know, they're Cody and myself. We handpick the buds that go into the glass jars that go out. You know, so
Wow.
when you buy the prepackaged, yeah, it's a little more expensive, but it comes in a glass jar. So that transition from curing in glass, we don't waste it by curing in glass for a month, but then turning around and sticking it in Mylar bags and putting it on the shelf.
That's a good point.
In glass. And it's going to be the cream of the crop whenever you get that. And part of the reason for pre-packs, they're super popular, but like the market in Colorado back last year, I guess it was around October, is when things really hit, and just the bottom fell out completely. And at that point in time, we were basically just doing bulk wholesale pounds, just like we did, you know, back in the day where we had vacuum seal bags that we put a pound in and
Sure.
send it to the dispensary. But it became apparent that we needed to have some other products to be able to move more product and to be able to retain a price point. So introducing more SKUs, like doing pre-rolled joints, prepackaged aids, along with starting to get into.
Were you doing is that how rosin really came back in the mix?
Joints infused.
Oh, that sounds nice.
rosin cards. And just, you know, I would say I know there's a lot of cultivators all across the nation right now that are starting to deal with the same type of thing where there's too many cultivations that are starting.
Yeah, supply and demand is a real issue in mature states.
People hate on the pre-packed flower, and then some people like it. Some people prefer deli style, and they prefer to go into a dispensary and see it in jars. And we like both. We think both has a place.
Yeah, and that's where branding is a big part as well. You know, like with the pre-packs, if you're comfortable with the brand and you know the process and you like the product, well then you're okay with buying a pre-pack. But if you walk in and you see a brand and you don't know them, you know, from anyone else, it's hard to buy product without being able to, you know, see what it looks like. So that's what I was getting to as far as in these other markets. In particular, like I was talking to a buddy in Michigan, and that's happening there. The price point in Michigan has just completely fallen. And here in Colorado, it fell, but you know, some of the craft grows have been able to hang on because we have an educated basis of buyers. In Michigan, I would say that there's probably not as many educated buyers as in Colorado, just because it's a newer market, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong.
They're like in my mind, they're like an immature Colorado. It's really, there's some heads up there growing some good herb, but you know, they're a little bit behind on development, but they're catching up quickly.
Yeah. And so his complaint was that right now all it is about price and THC percentage. And so they grow amazing product, but they're in this battle about THC percentages.
30+%. Yeah.
Can we tell the listeners real quick that we don't believe in high THC percentages and getting you higher? It's all about the entourage effect of THC and cannabinoids. Period, point blank, the end. THC percentages don't mean jack.
It's interesting, right? Like, but it is such a consistent driver from like a KPI standpoint of what people are looking for and what they're willing to pay for. And I've been in markets where like, if it's not 25% or more, like don't even try and sell it to us. And you're like, but again, if it has this like really unique terpene profile and does all this other stuff, like, sure you don't want to take a look at that, you know?
Some of my favorite flower that gets me the absolute most stoned is 19-20%.
Well, you guys have an old school cut of Romulan here that was really cool to see. And I mean, I haven't seen that in years, but I'm like, there's something special about that particular cultivar.
Percentage is low on that.
I'm sure it is, 18 to 22 or something, right? But there's other stuff, right? We have all these tertiary and minor cannabinoids and terpenes in play. And so I hear you. It is interesting how the market, though, is like really tied to that THC percentage.
And especially even extractors, too, they're looking for higher THC percentages, so when they extract, it comes out higher.
Yeah, they get their higher yields and returns. You know, it's trying to find a balance on all that stuff. I call it the utopian cultivar, but like I haven't really found one yet. You know, you look at something like, I don't know, GMO that has a lot of total THC and a lot of total terpene profile, but it's also like a really long maturation time.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have been breeding with it and trying to like make those novel improvements. And I think it's what makes all these strains and cultivars like so, it's fascinating.
Yep. Well, and I mean, it basically comes down to you're one of two different types of cultivators. You're either cultivating for high-end flower or you're cultivating for extraction.
Yeah.
Biomass.
The biomass, yeah, the old biomass.
Because if you're trying to produce, you know, the terpiest phenos that we've had are the lowest esters. And I think that plays into the fact that in our pursuit of trying to breed high THC percentages, we bred out a lot of the terpene profiles from some of the old school strains.
That's what happened to CBD back in the day. Like we didn't have lab testing. Like we almost bred CBD out of cannabis completely. And then all of a sudden we got some lab testing and then there were some kids with seizures and all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute. And then you saw CBD come back, but like we essentially did that. But you know, and I remember when we used to test product at Kind Love and it was back in the day. So we had to smoke it. There's no labs to go to.
To test some of the bud that Josh and I met smoking back in the day.
Sure.
Every once in a while, you know, in October or November, you get that good Christmas bud.
Sure, Christmas bud.
Hardly any seeds in it. It was swag, but it was really good bud. And like some of that ganja was some of the best bud that I've ever smoked in my life.
Had some kind of high pinene terpene or something. It was just like a big
Super high.
That's
fighting a Christmas tree.
So great.
Say that back then, I mean, it was so different from the swag, and you would see that you would be skeptical about it. Like, is this real? Because it smelled so piney.
Yeah. Well, and like, so there's a correlation between some terpenes and THC, like stuff that has higher pinene percentages, typically are lower THC. And so like, if you go out there and you go to all these shops, you're not going to find a lot of product that has pinene.
Yeah, it's definitely not unfortunately
a dominant terpene. That's kind of one of the things that's really cool about that Romulan is that it's got really high pinene.
Yeah. Yeah, you see a lot of like myrcene and beta caryophyllene.
But I swear, man, whenever I hit something that tastes earthy, I just know that I'm going to get super baked. And
Like a nice peat bog in the mouth.
I don't go off THC percentages, I go off terps.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Nice.
Your nose.
As we wrap up here a bit, what does the future look like for you guys? You guys have some goals for Colorado market or beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing some work with other companies across the country, helping them with design and operating procedures. And, you know, we're in that era where there's a lot of publicly traded companies that are making big moves. And so like, I feel like some of the smaller cultivations, craft cultivations, are going to have to figure out ways to work together.
Well, the big guys have, you know, these big multi-state operators or MSOs as they're called, they're struggling to put out the quality product consistently. It's not a secret by any means. And I think you might just see a nice wave of, hey, if we can't put out as good a product as these craft guys, like let's buy them or partner and just let them continue to do what they do. But let's put that brand underneath our house of brands.
That's the house of brand. And that's what we plan on. You know, we want to move into other states. We're, you know, right now we're just cultivation and extraction. We've been working on potentially a retail space to be vertically integrated here in Colorado. So as soon as that happens, because I mean, as a cultivator, the only way that you can hedge your bets is by owning a retail space.
Guaranteed shelf space that you control, for sure.
At least have a percentage of your crop that
Yep.
you are directly selling and have the outlet for, and then you can work on wholesale for the rest. But that'll be the next step. And then
Cool.
from there, we'll definitely be looking at trying to take Indico into some other states.
And you mentioned you're doing some more events and things like that, you know, and trying to get like more of the brand near, you know, music and more cannabis culture events.
That
That
stuff
kind of
has been killer lately. I mean, it's done wonders, you know. And I think one thing that we started doing with other companies that's kind of made a splash and that I hope people follow suit is that for a long time, cultivations, whenever there's events, you have like a cultivation and an extractor and an ancillary company and like, you know, different pieces that come. And so we've been doing events where we've been doing it with other cultivators, whereas in the past, most of the time cultivators keep their cards pretty close to their chest, that they don't, you know, as far as playing nice with other cultivations, it seems like there's always been this barrier. And so we've been doing events where other cultivations that we respect and know that they put out quality product, and been doing stuff together.
Cool.
And working together to create a presence of, you know, quality, if you will. And, you know, people fucking love that.
It's like cooperation, or, you know, it's like cooperating competition, where it's like you're just trying to level up each other in a positive, constructive way. It's interesting that you make that comment, because I see with like more traditionally or conventionally grown cannabis specifically, that there's this like competitive edge thing where it's like, I'm not telling you shit, or like whatever, right? Yeah. It still has that old school secretive stuff. The living organic soil community in the cannabis space is like the complete opposite. They're just like, we need more living organic soil grown. Like, you're growing that, that's great. Like, how can we help you? Maybe we can split. We're getting our soil here. If we're getting the same mix, like maybe we can bulk buy and benefit each other. And like, oh, we have a really good microscope. It's really fascinating. But like with the, with the conventional cultivated cannabis, like there's still that old school, like, I'm not telling you, you know, but it's a real thing. So it's cool to see that that's, you know, maybe.
You can tell people all day on how to do something. Are they going to do it right, though, is the question.
Totally. Yeah. You know, this concept of secret sauce is kind of funny.
Yeah, that's why we're not afraid to tell people, like, you know, we'll give you some advice. And
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hard to apply, right? It's like, and it's easy to say. We could sit here and talk about how great or whatever, but like when you're in the trenches as an owner operator and like things are not going according to plan, or there's some outlying factors and you've got it's real work and it's real hard. And to bring it all together to tie into music like harmoniously is such a challenge. It's like a symphony, you know, it's like getting everything in its place, and inevitably there's always someone out of tune or something where you're like, ooh, so close, right?
I know. So our DJ sets in the garden is called Scentsy Sessions. So you can follow us on Instagram at Scentsy Sessions on Instagram. You can follow Indico at Indico INC on Instagram. You can catch our sets on both. And Josh and I, when we do pop-ups, we're doing Scentsy Sessions on the road too. So
cool.
If you ever go to your favorite dispensary and you see us DJing in there, that's what we're doing.
Awesome.
And then the one last thing that we need to touch on when we were talking about advice for people that are getting going is the classic, keep it simple, stupid.
Sure.
Keep it simple, stupid, and don't dry your product in a room that's 15% humidity. You don't want that Colorado crunch where you break up your bud and it just turns
dust.
Into
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. What an awesome time. What a great brand. I'm excited to check it out a little bit more and continue on your journey. Yeah, of course, man. I appreciate it.
Loving Pipp.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
And shout out to Pipp.